Name is Khari Edwards. I'm running for Brooklyn Borough President.
Okay. And why are you running for Brooklyn Borough President?
Running for Brooklyn Borough President for probably one specific reason. I was the vice president of Brookdale Hospital for the last 8 years. And prior to that, did almost 20 years in government and did a lot of community relations, community liaison work. Top priority is housing and every alliteration of housing, from homelessness to affordability to the size of units. We've recently seen in New York City and Brooklyn, especially, that we're no longer building 3 bedroom and 4 bedrooms. So a family of 3 or 4 has, a small place, if at any, to have a bed or otherwise. And this became more personal to me because recently, about 2 years ago, I had a fire in my home, and I have 3 children, a wife, and my dad. And what happened to us is that we couldn't even find a place temporarily that can house all of us. So my dad had to stay somewhere else, my kids had to stay somewhere else, and so it just became very apparent that if you want to get married and have children, Brooklyn is not the place for you. So I want to change that.
At least based on your website, it seems like you take pride in not being a politician or the traditional version of a politician. So why should voters be more drawn to you because of that?
I think every politician started out as an everyday person. Many of them still are everyday people, but it's a difference. I started my career 20 years ago in public service, and I mentioned that taking constituent calls was something that I gravitated to. I alluded to a lady, Miss Owens, calling and her lights being turned off, and I was able, through my office and through the assembly member that I worked for, to get her lights turned back on. But it's so much different than working next to the problem every day, seeing folks who have union members who have pensions and benefits living in shelters, or seeing victims of gun violence coming through the emergency room, or even just understanding health issues. I'm a type 1 diabetic myself. So I think that the borough presidency has a place in everyday life, everyday grassroots life, that do separate. When you become an elected officials, you have a plethora of other issues you have to take care of. And I want the voters to vote for me because this role is who I am. I am a person of the people, and my campaign is about putting people first.
Right, cool. Um, just so I know, what are you working in now? Are you working now, or what's your job at the moment?
No, so I left my position at Brookdale Hospital because I really believed in what I'm doing. I really believe that in order to really serve folks, you have to go with your dreams. The funny things, I always compare myself to some of the other electeds. They get to keep their jobs and still campaign, but my wife is tired of me being home and doing all that stuff. So no, I'm home, unemployed. uh, that's a good thing I say, but I'm home unemployed right now, chasing a dream of mine.
We also talked a little bit about your background in healthcare and how that kind of makes you hyper aware to the issues that have been just exacerbated by COVID. So can you just explain to me a little bit of what it was like working at Brookdale, especially between March and August when you left?
Yeah, working in Brookdale during COVID was the most depressing and toughest time of my life. I mean, I can't even say of my career, of my life. We saw the lack of healthcare resources, the lack of healthcare education firsthand when we were dealing with 3-hour waiting lines to get into the emergency room, when we were having folks who walked in healthy and then all of a sudden either had a heart attack or kidney failure and died 20 minutes later. We lost over close to 660 people at Brookdale Hospital, 15 employees. I also got COVID myself, and it was probably the worst 17 days of my entire life. At one point, I was in the shower crying hysterically, thinking that my life was over, even though all I really had was body aches and high fever. Also, too, it was a moment of truth. It was a moment of bringing the issues of Brooklyn, and I say Brooklyn because it wasn't just Brookdale's side of town. It was also other sides of town where we weren't getting the resources we needed, and we were trying to support the governor and the mayor and talking about the lack of PPE and lack of ventilators, because so I allowed CNN into the hospital, and almost lost my job about over it. But the reality of it is the world needed to see the fact that things weren't okay, and what Trump was saying and everybody else was saying, it wasn't okay. And so knowing that we have the highest comorbidities in Brooklyn, in East Brooklyn, diabetes, hypertension, asthma, and then adding into COVID, I couldn't even describe it in any sense of that. It was just a horrible experience. And I thank God every day for everybody that I worked with pushing us through. There were real healthcare heroes, and that's not an understatement.
In terms of the way that you intend to set a precedent slash interact with the NYPD and try to integrate keeping everyone safe with the work the police are trying to do, and then also um, trying to create synchronism, I guess, with the community as well. How do you plan on tackling that and going to put people's minds at ease when they want to be safe, but they also want to trust the people that are responding to a call for 911, call for help?
Yeah, I mean, it's I quantified it this way, right? As a hospital worker and a hospital executive, I had to take sexual harassment training. And it sounds like a weird thing, but you go into most corporations, you have to take trainings, and I don't think that the police department puts enough energy into these diversity trainings, these de-escalation trainings, these um, customer service trainings, and I think that, yeah, what, we're not going to again solve everything with one magic pill, but I do think that we need to require our NYPD officers to go through these trainings and get certified, and so that the justification and the understanding on how to come into a community of color, or how to deal with LGBTQ, or how to even just speak to someone when you pull them over, will go a long way. And I think that's something that we have to think out the box about, and say to these gentlemen, if you're going to go to the police academy, or you're in your 5 years of service, you have to do this, because I have to do sexual harassment training every year. I have to do compliance training every year in order for me, to continue my employment. I don't see why a front facing, position like police officers don't go through the same thing. And that's one of the things that I would like to, impact and suggest, once I take office. And I think that, I'm not a believer. I'm a believer that we can reduce crime substantially. I think that, giving young people something to do, helps, idle minds stay busy. And I think, when I grew up, we had the PAL, we had the Boys and Girls Club, we had Beacon programs, and so there wasn't a reason to kind of get into trouble. Even though kids did get into trouble, I think the way that we address what has happened this last summer, even in a financial crisis, is to open up avenues and opportunities for these young people to do things. When I toured Coney Island, which had a huge gang gun violence issue, the guys that were telling me, that were taking me around, told me, listen, a lot of this was reduced when they started to build up new developments in Coney Island. And he was like, specifically because what you did was you gave these young people jobs, you gave them construction jobs, you gave them opportunities to do something. And so therefore they weren't getting into beef, they weren't getting into trouble, they weren't sitting on the other side of Zooms or, tweets and getting at each other. So again, solving crime is going to be a big issue in life. But I do think that the way we chip away and we reduce it is by taking those young people, getting them off the corner, getting them out of trouble, giving them something to do, whether it's basketball or creative writing, or it's, after school programs. It's something that I think that, we have to do. And the one thing not the one thing, but one of the things that the borough president, Eric Adams, did that was great was that, he paid for school permits. And what those school permits did for some communities is allow the school to be open after hours. And so it gave children an opportunity to do things. And that will be one of my big priorities too, once we get through COVID and we can, socially gather again, is to open up the schools, open up the gymnasiums and the classrooms, and create, like I said, these beacon programs.
Mhm. So which neighborhood in Brooklyn are you from? And, just talk a little bit about how you identify with that place, that section of Brooklyn.
So born and raised in Crown Heights. They've broken up Crown Heights a little bit, but it's still Crown Heights to me. Off of Carroll Street, was born in Brooklyn Jewish Hospital, went to a Catholic school around the corner, St. Mark's, which is on Brooklyn and President. Then went to Midwood High School. So I identify with Crown Heights, but I spent a lot of time in East Flatbush because that's where all my friends who were from. So I just say Brooklyn.
Just Brooklyn. Got it.